Hi there, my name is Paul Burrows. I'm Flood and Coastal Risk Manager for the Environment Agency within our East Anglia area, and I look after the River Great Ouse catchment that covers the Great Ouse Fens of Norfolk and Cambridgeshire. And what I want to do today, along with my colleague Vicky Eade, is describe to you the journey we've been on strategically in the Great Ouse Fens. We're at the very start of that journey, so what we want to do is give you a high-level overview of where we are within this presentation. So the Great Ouse Fens has got a deep and rich history of flood risk infrastructure, and what we have today is a complex web of flood assets, over 300 flood assets, that most of which are working 24/7, 365 days a year, not only to provide flood protection to some of the country's best agricultural land, most productive agricultural land, but it also enables some of the growth ambitions within some of the fastest growing parts of the country, thinking about the Oxford to Cambridge growth area. And what we have today are 300 assets that all operate and work together to provide a flood protection that is really fit for today. But the big question is, will it be fit for the future, thinking about the challenges of climate change? And what we have are multiple organisations who all have a role and responsibility for flood risk infrastructure. And what we need to do is work together, probably for the first time ever, to create that future pathway. So we've got lots of assets that are working in a rural landscape, and they're quite misunderstood, and you wouldn't really appreciate and value them until you see them under pressure, like I did in winter 2020-21, where they were under pressure with the floods within the Great Ouse catchment. So we've got lots of assets out there, all of which not only provide flood protection, but they also enable some fantastic wildlife to thrive through some conservation sites that are of high public value, enable navigation, recreation, amenity functions as well. And they also provide for some fantastic water resource, and not only just for agricultural land, but for public water supply as well. So these flood assets and flood infrastructure provide for a range of different uses, and different people have different demands on the infrastructure that we have out there. And what we have now is a set of flood assets, by and large, that are aging and coming to the end of their, what we call their design life. The last major investment in, I guess, systemic flood infrastructure was about 60 or 70 years ago with the Great Ouse, or the Ely Ouse Flood Protection Scheme, as we call it today. That was the last really big, significant investment in flood infrastructure. Investments since that time have continued and will continue, but what we need to do is look at the questions about what the next generation of flood infrastructure is needed within the Great Ouse, and also within the wider fens across the east of England, to cater for the challenges that climate change will bring to this vulnerable area. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Vicky to take you through where we are as of today.
Thanks, Paul. So one of the key things about this project is that we've done it in collaboration with many of the key organisations, as Paul mentioned, that have flood risk assets in the fens. So you can see there from the slide that there's many organisations that fit within that patch, and we'll extend our thanks to the work of those people on that technical group. We wouldn't have got through the last 2 to 3 years without the support in terms of their information, their expertise and their data. And we're now at a key point in time where we need to share with you the findings, and I'll just talk you through the phases of the project so you can see the timescales and our planning along the way. So as Paul gave an introduction, we're in the first phase of this long-term project. We anticipate it taking between 10 and 15 years. That's based on experience from other large projects that are currently underway, such as the Humber Strategy and the Thames Estuary Plan. We're in the first phase, as I said, and that is we've just produced the baseline report, and we've now scheduled a couple of years to then engage and do different visualization techniques to help explain the findings of the baseline report, and also to share the understanding that we've gained and to discuss what we might look like for the future. So we've gathered a huge amount of data on all of those assets that Paul mentioned briefly. There's something like 396 assets to be precise. We've also produced other reports in detail, so that sit alongside the baseline report. For those of you who want that detail, there's also the economics report and a separate gauging and survey report. And we've used all of that information to help build a picture of what currently exists today and how much it costs to have what we have today in terms of flood risk assets. We also hope then in phase 2 to then go on and identify some different options for flood risk management and how those assets might look in the next 100 years. And we also need to identify those, as we term them, beneficiaries. So they are businesses, people, stakeholders who benefit from our flood risk management regime, and discuss with them how they might like the flood risk management assets to look in the future. We then anticipate that will take probably between 5 and 10 years to do that phase. And after that, we're then what we call phase 3 and delivery of the options. So that's where, once we know what the options look like, we will then go into scale delivery of a scheme or a whole scale project with our partners to then have a different future for flood risk management in the Fens. So that's it for the journey to how we've got to today. There'll be a separate slide and video for sharing the findings of the report, and Paul and I will take you through those in that presentation.